Hello and welcome back to Galactic Goddess Podcast. I'm your host, Radha Nelia. And today we have a very special guest, Chiraya Dharma. She is a manifesting mentor, advanced energy healer, clairvoyant spiritual guide, and a best-selling author. And today we're going to discuss the power of symbology and decoding spiritual teachings from scriptures. Welcome, Chiraya.
Thank you so much, Rada. It's such a delight to be with you again here on the Galactic Goddess podcast.
I'm so excited to dive in with you. You're such a wealth of knowledge, and I'm grateful that you're going to be sharing so much today. So let's just dive right in. Let's talk about, spiritual symbols and scriptures and how we can start to decode them and how we can tune into them.
Absolutely. So I have just had a lifelong passion for study of a spiritual nature, really doing my best to try to find out, A, what the heck is going on the planet? B, who are we? Who am I? And how does this knowledge from the inside translate to our ability to manifest our lives on purpose, to heal, and to show up as benevolent beings creating a world on purpose? So that really brought me to the study, and with a number of really beautiful beings who've helped me over the years, especially when I was in my 20s, pointing me to look at scripture from a different point of view, whether you're talking about the Vedic scriptures or the Christian scriptures or the Buddhist canon, the Pali Canon, or any of the other ancient spiritual teachings, which have just left an incredible legacy for us on the planet. And there's been a lot of mix up and confusion around who's right and who's wrong about what things mean. So part of why we wanted to do this topic today is just to sort of clean the air and clean the mind from the confusion about it, so that if somebody is attracted to a certain set of teachings, they could understand that the universe source within us, the creator within us, that God, self, by whatever name we each choose to call God, is going to speak to us in whatever language it can. It's going to get through to us any which way it can. It could be like a book falling off a bookshelf and knocking you in the head, and you open to a page and it's exactly what you wanted to hear. Or it could be diving deep into the Vedic scriptures or the Christian scriptures, or any of these other traditions, if you will. And so if we think about the spiritual teachings as universal, I think that helps a lot. In other words, there's not really a right and wrong about which way you're going to go about it. But when you do go about it, if you go about it knowing that God personal to you, source personal to you, is going to speak to you in a way you can comprehend, then we can clear away a lot of the dust and confusion about the different interpretations that have happened around different scriptures over time. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. I really like how you said, think of it universally. And maybe perhaps there's overlapping things too in different scriptures. Like maybe things have been, everything is interpreted through the eye of the beholder, and through also the lenses and the consciousness, right? So if maybe a few people are decoding or writing the same thing, it could come out very different based on their judgments and their personal beliefs as well. So it's interesting because it's almost like we have to go deeper, and so I'd like to ask how, like, on your journey of reading all this material and through all these studies, how did you drop into a deeper level where you were able to just take in more of the essence rather than the just what you just see, verbatim?
Really great question, because one of my favorite things to do actually is to see and discern how the different scriptures are actually pointing to the same universal truths in different ways. And so it takes what I want to say, we have to come with an empty cup. If we come with a cup full of ideas, if our brain already thinks it knows exactly what this means and that means and the other thing means, then we're going to miss. We're not teachable in that moment.
Yeah.
And, we obviously also want to be discerning as well. So it's this balance of openness and discernment, really masculine, feminine, we could call it that, or just like keeping our mind and our heart open to receive truth, while also being willing to cut away whatever doesn't feel like it serves at any given moment. And there's no, like, if one set of scriptures or one set of teaching just really doesn't resonate for whatever reason, it doesn't even matter. Just put that aside. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. But whichever, if you do want to go in and compare, or if you want to learn a teaching from a system that's maybe new to you, or get deeper to the tradition that you love, when we go in there with that openness and that discernment combined, then we'll be able to hear the still small voice that's guiding us to the right page of that book, to the right next thing we need to study. It's like opening, knowing that source is with you, knowing that God is with you, knowing that truth, that spiritual truth, is always there helping us take the next step and the next step and the next step. If we can cultivate a trust in that, then we can bring that to our spiritual studies. And it's like finding a needle in a haystack. And that's one thing I was lucky to be taught at a young age, in my 20s, when I really started on this journey of deeper study in the scriptures. Nothing is cut and dry, and no one set of translations or interpretations of those translations is going to be completely accurate, nor can we necessarily understand the mindset with which that teacher was teaching that Christian at that time, in terms of why certain imagery might be used, or like you were saying, why certain symbols might be used. So we have to take it as sort of a needle in a haystack thing, and it's going to come to us, the teaching and the revelation of the teachings are going to come to us on an individual basis for us personally. So if we can start to trust that this personal spiritual essence of ourselves is guiding us step by step to find the right next piece and the next piece and the next piece, I think that's a really big, that's something that can open the heart and create a lot of room in there to grow and navigate.
Oh, I love that. That makes so much sense. Like, we want to just sort of like, okay, I'm going to open up to new concepts and ideas. And I'm also, I always think of like, it's like a prayer with the divine. Like, if you're going to read something sacred, maybe ask that creator help you to interpret it through the eyes of creator, so that it sort of funnels back into your consciousness in a way that it's meant to, from creator's perspective, perhaps, rather than.
That's absolutely beautiful. I love that. Yes.
Wow. And so can you tell us like about, like, you've read a lot of different scriptures. You were talking about like the Buddhism and how we can see different pieces of these scriptures in different cultures. And do you want to speak on that, like any similarities that you've seen, or that you've see that's repetitive, or trying to continuously share a specific message, perhaps?
Well, the basis always comes back to what we call love, and I'm going to use the word comprehension. Comprehending how the laws of the universe works and who we are is sort of a thread throughout everything, if you will. So when you think about, like, so for example, we know that in Buddhism and in the Vedic scriptures and in the Eastern traditions in general, it's all about enlightenment, which is also called awakening, which is also called self-realization. And then in those various scriptures, there are very nuanced, sometimes, descriptions of steps along the way in the pathway, everything from becoming enlightened or awakened to full realization of oneself as at one with the supreme divine, which is the ultimate goal. And then for an individuated being in a physical incarnation, depending on all the things that have happened in their past lives, all the things that have happened on that soul's journey, combined with their intent toward full awakening or various levels of awakening, they're going to be encountered with different types of teachings in that in any given lifetime to either keep them slumbering or bring them to the next step. So that's why most of the different scriptures talk about the preciousness of a human life, like this precious human life, this precious opportunity to grow and aspire. And that we ought to take advantage, full advantage of this lifetime, because we want to balance what's called the three gunas, which is, rajas, tamas, and sattvic energy. So sattvic energy is that pure energy. Tamasic energy is the energy of ignorance, and rajasic energy is the energy of passion. So we have that sattvic, or that purity, in the middle, and that's where even the teachings of morality, do unto others, being a good person, showing up, following a mode and a code that allows you to be benevolent, as opposed to coming from ignorance or coming from over passion, like dullness versus too much fire. That there's whole systems helping people, ancient systems helping people learn how to balance oneself so that one can become more sattvic. And then at the end of the day, once you've trained yourself away from the animalistic nature, away from the bad habits, away from the sort of wanton nature of what's possible here in this earth plane, without judging oneself. Hopefully by that time you're not judging yourself either. But then, then there's even a level above those three gunas to where you're at one with all of it and you get it. It's like, oh, God is everything, everywhere, has had all experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the otherwise. And, we make peace with that, and we rise above and transcend even further at that point. But, along the way, I could say that spiritual traditions have had the wisdom to guide everyone in a morally upright fashion. Now, there can be a lot of confusion about that too, because the human mind, in its tendency to judge, might confuse making positive decisions that are benevolent with right and wrong, and judge people who veer away from the codes of the day and hurt or harm them even, which is absolutely against the code of benevolence. Do you know what I mean? Like, it gets twisted up over time. But you can see that thread of the golden rule, for example, is definitely found, throughout these different teachings.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I could just imagine like the golden thread of wisdom weaving through each kind of scripture, and you have to find that rhythm with the divine. And it's wow, it is a gift to be alive. It is amazing. I love what you said. It's like this is our opportunity in a physical form to work through so much, and perhaps that's why we have so many challenges, as a collective. Even you can see that as a collective, because we're almost like churning. It's like, ghee, like you're churning the butter, churning the experiences, churning the challenges into something that you can benefit from. Like it's not all here just to be, cause us problems. Like we're here to maybe learn that we can overcome our limitations. And I think perhaps, do the scriptures talk about that? Like, is there something in the scriptures that talk about us transcending?
It is. And it's interesting because in the Vedic scripture, you're talking about the churning. There's a whole teaching and, whole relief sculptures on buildings, paintings, everything about this. The devas and the demons and the angels tugging on this snake that's wrapped around, I believe, a lingam in the middle, churning the ocean, pushing and pulling. And that whole scripture has many, many levels and layers of meaning to it as well, and perhaps an original meaning that could be elusive to us. But it reminds me of what you're saying, like the so-called positive and the so-called negative, pushing and pulling within us to alchemize and, turn that lead into gold, of a lower consciousness into a higher consciousness, and that really ends up breeding wisdom.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, everything is not as cut and dry as the game board down here tends to lead us to think it is, if you will.
I could see that. Life, let's be honest, life could be messy, it could be challenging. It feels like we have to keep going, you know, you know, and
Yeah.
just keep moving forward. And sometimes we fall back down and getting up. But I I can tell you, like, in one lifetime, this has felt like 1,000 lifetimes in one lifetime. And I think I'm not the only one that feels that way. I feel like universally people feel like they've lived so many lifetimes in this lifetime. Like it's almost like they're meeting certain um parts of their past life even, and
Mhm.
then working through those kinks and moving forward. And so we didn't come here, I think, to be perfect at all. That's not the goal. Like that's ridiculous. I think the goal is to continue to get back and to keep trying, keep moving forward, keep trying, keep coming back to our center and forgiving ourselves for not being perfect. Because in the spiritual community, it could be very dogmatic about, like you said, like with the scriptures and stuff, like, like you're not judging people. And if somebody falls off the rails for a little bit and they have to go through their experience and learn their karmic lessons, and then they jump back on stronger than ever, like we don't know what that means to that person. So it's true that the judgment is a big thing, and it's not easy because it seems like from day one we've learned to judge. It's
Mhm.
part of our culture. And so unlearning that is it's it's something we have to be conscious of. And I think the worst judge is for ourselves. Like we judge ourselves, like, oh, you messed up, like you, or you weren't, like whatever. And I think we have to just really be more gentle with ourselves and know that this is full on. It seems to be very full on, and we're moving forward with such velocity that when we do have, it's like I heard about clash and cohesion. Sometimes we have to clash for things to sort of, the particles to move around and restructure and realchemize. And it's not always like this magical, like la 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 la. It's like, sometimes it's not like that. Most of the time, it's not like that, and we just have to.
Messy,
It's
messy.
messy. It's like,
That's part of it. So that thread within the scriptures is all about humanity cleaning up that messiness, like
yeah,
cleaning up our room. It's like the room is our brain, it's like there's some scaric residue, which today we call them neural pathways,
yeah.
get in a rut, causing us to think, feel, and act in a certain way. This is related to karma,
Mm,
action, seeds of thought and imagining and feeling that led to actions, that led to results, that led to more judgment, sorrow, despair, anger, grief,
like,
which led to more, which led to more. So we call that, in the teachings as they're coming through now, we call it compounded momentum in the nature of the law. And
mhm.
so, what gets worse, and what gets better, because our leading thought and imagination is heading in a certain direction. It becomes like a boulder running down the hill.
Yeah,
And even those judgments that we were talking about, that you were talking about there, they come from, well, you can think about it, both ignorance and passion sometimes. So if someone was in that centered, more sattvic, pure place, they might see, like what you're talking about is, oh, that person had a lifetime that they're working out right now. And what I really need to do with them is lift them up, be non-judgmental, show them another way.
mhm.
Whereas if we're coming from either ignorance, thinking we know everything when we don't, and judging them, or we're coming from our passion and wanting to punish them, now we're just creating more imbalance, right? We're just,
For karma too, right? Like
Perpetuating the karma. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So we're actually hooking into that their karmic wheel, and like, okay, let's just tumble with them, So when we
That's
judge,
why. Mhm.
it seems
Exactly.
like that's like almost like throwing the line out and you're wrapping that person up in that judgment, but you're also being wrapped up in it too. It's a
Exactly.
two-way street. It seems like.
That's why they say, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." So
Mhm.
that's what that scriptural from the Christian scripture, that Abrahamic scripture says, like, "Judge not, lest ye be judged," because whatever spell we're casting, we cast that net, we cast that sentence,
Mhm.
those
Mhm.
words, we spell those words together and cast it out to the universe through our mouth. We're catching ourselves in a web, in a karmic web of whatever that is there, unless we quickly course correct it. Oh wait, oops, oopsie daisy, because we do have the oopsie daisy clause, where we can cleanse, clear, heal, forgive, dissolve, delete. And
Yes, I like that.
yeah, and that's talked about in the different scriptures too. That's like, it's a lifelong path. It's like we can intellectually understand this stuff, but it's like, okay, yeah, let me just clear this one thing and then everything will be fine. It's like, all right, and then what'll happen next? It's like, oh well, it's like if we get into the understanding that we're in a lifelong spiritual journey of unfoldment,
Yeah.
and whatever is with us, it's for us if we know how to decode what the heck's going on and work with it and feel the burn of these old things burning out, but not be resistant to it and not judge it as that's happening to ourselves, like you're saying.
Wow.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to people so that they could release the judgment, start, because that could also be karmic, like maybe in their past life, like they held a position of like, a nun or a priest. I know that I've been a nun in past life, I've been a monk, and I had certain beliefs that were very stuck in those from those timelines. So I had to go in and like that's part of the karmic looping, right? So this is a different time, the different circumstances. Uh, you know, we have to, like the neurons you were saying, the neuron pathways, like we have to recreate those. And so
Yeah, if you repeatedly got punished for something that would be normal action today, in another lifetime we might be averse to doing a certain thing because of that. Like even with the Pali Canon, with Buddhism. So Buddha, this great, beautiful, wonderful teacher, this world teacher, came, delivered these teachings, which was a lifelong spiritual path. And in order to do that at that time, he had to set up an ashram around himself. It built itself, and then people came to administer that, the hierophants or whatever, to keep the administration of the teaching group going in a logistical way, right? Like everybody had to have food, everybody had to have clothing. They wanted people to get along. They didn't want people getting wrapped up in more karma. So they had rules around sexuality, they had rules around eating, around food, about how many objects you could own. Like they had an incredible number of rules
yeah.
for being a part of that sangha, that community, which were relevant to the time. But then once Buddha passed, they had to come together again, as a conclave and decide, well, what rules do we keep and what rules do we leave behind? And if there weren't clear instructions from the Buddha, they just kept them. But it didn't necessarily mean Buddha really thought you had to only have one bowl for the rest of your life, something like that. But they kept them because they didn't want to
Yeah.
do something they didn't understand why he had said to do that. You know what I mean? So then the mind gets in it, and then it gets into tradition, and then you're like, it's like, you're gonna follow these rules. Oh my god! And then that's just like, that could be another teaching, right? At the end of the day, when you actually achieve divine perfect enlightenment and you're awake, you're like, you can have the belly laugh. You're like, I was thinking about that bowl,
It makes so much sense. Different times, different teachings, and things are always evolving. Our lives are evolving, the circumstances are evolving. Um, And sometimes we come into different karmic lives for different experiences. Say one lifetime we came to experience, I don't know, like monk beat, total poverty. Another lifetime we might want to experience, abundance. And but sometimes those like vows can transfer over, like the vow of poverty that a lot of spiritual people have, because in many lifetimes they've served in these convents or monasteries, or of different sorts. And so there, or whatever that may be, right? So there's all different kinds of rules about relationships. And so it's so interesting. It's so important, I think, to decode that within ourselves. So when we have those thoughts, we can go, oh, wait a minute, is this really relevant? And then um trying to see if we can release that. And that's what the energy healing does, right? Because energy healing helps your neurons to release, and it helps release that vibrational, like kind of like it's like locked in your body, so kind of releases out of your system. So energetically it's releasing out so that you can be like, okay, I'm gonna have a different experience about and this is part of my life path now, is to have a new experience, but I can still integrate that other aspect that I was before.
Yeah, there's residue. So we call it's like the residue of the samskaric
Mhm.
repercussions over time lead us into thought clusters and behavior patterns that are, like you said, they're really not relevant right now. But the emotion, it's like literally electrical charges pinging in the brain that causes to have that tendency. So when we and they're connected to certain thought forms too. So that's why we go back and we clean and we forgive and we heal and we let go. And there's multiple different ways and means of doing that. There's a deep forgiveness process that has come through, that I work with people in a somatic process that's also related to many different types of modalities, including like Vipassana that Buddha taught is a deep, deep, deep energetic samskaric residue cleansing experience, plus plus. So there's most of the work, the energy work has many different flavors depending on who you are, where you are, and what resonates with you. Right now we've got many choices, which is nice.
Yeah. Flavor, just like ice cream. What would you like?
Yeah, and maybe in that lifetime where you could only have one bowl,
Yeah.
and then you follow that and you had only one bowl every single lifetime after that for 10 lifetimes, maybe it taught you something in there
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, non-attachment, simple living, all these things. But then eventually you might be like, I think I want a whole set of bowls.
Singing bowls, a whole room of them,
Like, if we're the creator, like we are that creator within ourselves. That creative energy is not separate, like not two. There's not two. There's one. There's one being showing up as all of us. And so that's that journey that all the different scriptures are trying to help us along on, is the journey of awakening to the truth of who we really are and what we really are and how we work, how life works, how life flows through us to manifest new realities and new experiences. So we have managed to, like you were pointing to earlier, limit ourselves in some truly amazing and remarkable ways, considering who we actually are. And we may not have ever had a chance to have such an experience of limitation if we hadn't gone through the contortions of putting ourselves in these little mental, emotional boxes, So it's like, oh, cheerio, good job, that you really did it. You did, boy, God, that big God being that you are, you just really boxed yourself up. Amazing, amazing.
Amazing.
How was that for you?
That's such a great reminder. Like, hey, we signed up for this, remember? I remind myself, like, who signed up for this?
Yeah, it's like, wait, no, that was not me. Definitely not. No.
Yeah.
I would never have signed that. No.
But I think it is pretty incredible. It's incredible how resilient our souls are, and how adaptable we are. And when we give ourselves just some space to kind of workability, right? Teachability, and we can, and doing the energy healing to sort of help align us to this lifetime, and or even like maybe even bring in some of the gifts we've had in other lifetimes. And I can only imagine that reading various scriptures activates us too. Maybe if we lived in that particular lifetime, there might be information there for us to activate within ourselves. And it's like this game where we're here to remember. And now, especially, we're here to remember. So it is um it's a beautiful, magnificent time that we're living in. As chaotic and wild as it is, there is so much to be uncovered, and I think we're on our way. So having conversations like this is really amazing and fantastic, so thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Yes, absolutely. My pleasure.
Is there anything else you'd like to share on this topic before we end?
Mm. Yeah, well, I think you're onto it. You know, when we think about merit achieved in other lifetimes, meaning, you know, maybe we spent multiple lifetimes in a Buddhist system or a Vedic system, or in places that had some of these deeper spiritual wisdom codes, or even like an esoteric Christian or Muslim, or, you know, the deeper codes can be found in any of these religions. When you have eyes to see and ears to hear, and you're looking for the needle in the haystack, and you're tuned in with your source, and you're connected, and you're waiting to hear and receive that message that's just for you, for your personal journey of awakening and unfoldment. You know, so that merit, like, you're right, I believe you're right, that merit can be triggered, and to remember, like, well, why am I so good at piano playing, or why am I so good at understanding this one part of life? You know, why can I help people so easily with this? And maybe you've had multiple lifetimes in those directions, and that's your merit. So they say everything we have, we've earned in other lifetimes and timelines. And, you know, there's also grace, and there's also just the glory of God in us, and the beingness of life itself in us and through us, that the more open we are, that can pour through us and create beauty and bounty and healing for others around us as well.
Mhm.
And but, you know, by going back and looking at, if you have an inclination towards a certain culture or a certain time period, it could be fun to go back and look and actually start digging and say, well, what were they saying? How did they teach, you know, how did they teach spiritual awakening back then? What was that like? What is it? Is there a nugget for me that I'm wanting to bring forward to trigger my life purpose at this time? That could be a fun thing for people.
Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful. And you're probably going to be leading some groups. So I'll leave all your information below so people can find you and work with you. And thank you so much for joining us. And this conversation is to be continued. Until then, much love and blessings.
Thank
Bye
you very
for now.
much. Bye.